Welcome back to the Lemon Factor. I'm Chad, and today we are going to talk about arguably the most popular modification for the 10th generation Honda Accord. Now in the past, I did a video in which I covered what I consider the best performance modification, the best bang for the buck. If you're looking for an increase in horsepower and torque, what is that one modification that'll yield you the biggest gain? I also did a video in which I cover some of the more popular modifications for this platform. So if you're new to the platform, you don't know where to start, you're trying to get an idea of what your modification path, your modification journey should look like, this video, again, I'll link it below, should help you with that as well. But in today's video, we're going to cover what the most popular modification is for the 10th generation Honda Accord. And that would be an air intake. Aftermarket air intakes. Extremely popular for this platform. People usually buy an aftermarket air intake, generally speaking, for one of two reasons. The first one, either to increase horsepower and torque, so a performance gain, or people are purchasing it so they can hear the turbo sucking in the air. And with an aftermarket air intake, depending on which one you get, you'll be able to hear that. So if you're interested in getting an aftermarket air intake, you're curious to know which one to buy, then stay tuned. If you change your filter on your air intake to something that's less restrictive, theoretically speaking, your engine, and in this case the turbo, can pull in more air more quickly, which will help produce additional horsepower and torque. So I guess on one end of the spectrum, which I do not recommend, you could remove your air filter altogether, and you have no restriction for your turbo trying to suck in that fresh air. Of course, we don't want to do that. That's dangerous for your turbo and for your engine itself. So you put a less restrictive filter. And if you can get a less restrictive, but also filter out the dust and the contaminants before it goes through your turbo as effectively as a stock OEM filter, then you have the best of both worlds. Next is creating the mechanicals, the intake of the air, you see here, and then once it goes through the filter, smoothing out the airflow so that that filtered air can make its way to the turbo in as quickly a manner as possible with as little turbulence as possible. Aftermarket air intakes will do just that. They'll change the air filter. They may change the assembly of how it's pulling in the air, and then it will change the air intake piping. So the first category is simply replacing your air filter with a less restrictive air filter. Those less restrictive air filters usually are oiled and washable cotton. It's made in such a way that it is less restrictive than the OEM, that it can pull in more air more quickly, and thus giving you additional performance gains. None of them specifically call out a horsepower or torque gain. The closest we come to that is with K&N, in which it, quote, says, designed to increase horsepower. What I find very interesting is the K&N on their website indicates a flow of 429 CFM. Now what's interesting with that is they say 429 CFM, and then elsewhere it says 50% increase in airflow. Now when I compare that to the AFE, specifically the AFE, the Magnum Flow Pro 5R air filter, that one claimed a 465 CFM airflow. So it flows a little bit more, but yet elsewhere AFE shows a 33% flow increase compared to stock. So we have an AFE that flows more than the K&N, but yet the K&N claims it flows 50% as opposed to AFE. If you're considering a panel filter, they run about $50. If you consider how much it costs to replace an OE air filter yourself, I did a video on how easy it is to replace your air filter and how cheap you can do it, but you can get those between $15 and $20. So considering these are $50, and again, they're washable, you can clean them and reuse them. Over time, you should make your money back on these air filters. And if they do increase your horsepower or torque a little bit, maybe it's worth it. However, I don't think you're going to hear a big difference if you're looking for that change in sound. The next category not only replaces your air filter, but it also replaces your intake pipe. This category is not totally enclosed. The available air intakes include the K&N Performance Air Intake System, the AEM Cold Air Intake System, and the InGen SP Short Ram Cold Air Intake System. And it's in a category by itself because they don't fully enclose it like the OEM. They do replace the OEM panel filter with a cone filter. And these cone filters, like the upgraded panel filters, are washable. They're usually oiled cotton. These air intake kits replace the intake pipe, smoothing out the airflow. And with it, these manufacturers are claiming quite impressive performance gains. These systems range between $300 and $400. The next category is a mixture. It's a hybrid between the two. And the only one that offers this is PRL, and it's PRL's Stage 1 intake system. So the hybrid is that it's replacing your panel filter with a higher performing panel filter. It also replaces your intake pipe with a silicone intake pipe. What's really impressive is the combination of those two, at least according to PRL, yields an increase of 16 horsepower and 18 foot-pounds of torque. Now, PRL doesn't include a dynograph. I'd like to see that. But at a price of $130, that's a pretty sizable performance gain if it really does deliver. Now, the last category is one in which it replaces, again, the filter with the cone filter and the entire intake pipe. But not only does it do that, but it also keeps everything enclosed. And why I think this is significant is you want to keep this enclosed because you don't want the engine heat to make its way into the air that you're trying to suck in into the turbo. You want this air as cool as possible. So for the intake systems that keep it open, or maybe it's just enclosed on 1 or 2 or 3 sides, but relatively speaking is still open, it leads itself to the possibility of pulling in some of that hot air created in the engine bay from your engine. And while those systems might be great from hearing the sound of the air being sucked into the engine, if that's what you're looking for, then great. Those are good options for you because it opens it up a little bit. They would not produce the most horsepower and torque. So this last category keeps it enclosed. This last category includes the PRL high volume intake system, the Mishimoto performance air intake, and the AFE Takeda Momentum cold air intake. There's 2 options here. One is with the Pro 5R filter, which is the washable oiled cotton filter, and the other one is the Pro Dry S. So this is a dry media, unlike the oiled media. Now, these systems, at least on their websites, identify pretty sizable performance gains, with the PRL indicating as much as a 24 horsepower gain and a 16 foot-pound gain with 30 horsepower throughout the top end. That is huge. That is pretty impressive. And if I wasn't so skeptical, I'd just run out and buy that one and call it call it a day. With the other, Mishimoto being 15.6 wheel horsepower and 12.9 foot-pounds of torque, and the Takeda anywhere between 9 and 12 horsepower and 10 and 11 foot-pounds of torque. These, like the others, range in price between $300, $400, so not cheap. What would I recommend? If you have a lease vehicle, if you want to just do minimal modifications, if you're concerned about voiding your manufacturer's warranty, simply replacing the panel filter may be your best option. If you are looking for the sound, you want to hear that air intake. You want to hear the air being sucked in by the turbo. The K&N, the AEM, and the engine may be good options given that it is more open and thus you will hear it more. However, if you're trying to increase the amount of horsepower and torque, then you may want to go to the last category, the PRL, Mishimoto, and Takeda, where it's, like I said, totally enclosed. Not sure if I fully trust some of these manufacturers' claims. Are they realistic to produce over and over again? And I'm gonna find out. So in an effort to help you decide which one of these air intakes is right for you, I have already purchased a whole bunch of them. I have purchased a panel filter. I've purchased the PRL Stage 1. I have purchased the PRL Stage 2, or the high volume intake system, as well as the Mishimoto and one of the AFE Takedas. We're gonna install them. We're going to test them for sound, and we're gonna take it to the dyno. We're gonna see how much horsepower, how much torque each one of these air intake systems really do produce, and see how they compare to the manufacturer's claim. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Thank you for joining, and until next time.